I'm Lisa Stone, and you're listening to Parenting Aces. Welcome to Season 9 of the Parenting Aces podcast. Yes, we are all still staying at home in the midst of COVID-19. I hope all of you out there are healthy and well, and your loved ones are healthy and well, and I hope you are all heeding the advice of our medical and science community to stay distant, stay at home, except for essential trips out of the house, and finding ways to maintain your sanity through all of this. It is an unusual time for sure. I am very lucky to be staying at home with my husband. I am not so lucky in that my kids are not here with me. They're in driving distance, but not physically with me, which has been really challenging. And I will say that the longer this goes on, the more we're starting to rely on different technological resources to stay connected with one another. I think that's really important during this time. But enough about that, because I know we're all inundated with COVID-19 news. This week's podcast is with John O'Sullivan of Changing the Game Project. And those of you who've been around a while may have heard my previous podcasts with John, may have read some of his articles that I've reposted on ParentingAces.com. He is a soccer coach. He works in the world of soccer, but his work transcends soccer for sure. And he is just doing such great stuff out there. The latest project that John has been involved in is a new book, and it's called Every Moment Matters: How the World's Best Coaches Inspire Their Athletes and Build Championship Teams. And when John says championship teams, he's not just talking about trophies and medals and ribbons. He is talking about creating championship human beings and the coaches that are able to do that and how they go about doing it and what the role of the parent is in that process. And in fact, he devotes an entire chapter of this new book on how coaches and parents need to be working together to develop champions, both on the court and in the world. So I'm really excited that John was able to join us. As you'll hear, he is at home right now with his wife and 2 kids, trying his best to stay connected to the athletes that he coaches and to the coaches that he coaches as well. But I think you're going to enjoy hearing from him, hearing what he's doing to keep his athletes engaged during this stay-at-home time, and what we as a tennis community can learn from him. So sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with John O'Sullivan. I am so happy to have you back on the show, John O'Sullivan. It's been a little while since we've chatted, not that long, but you've had a lot going on. Fill us in.
Well, it took me this long to write another book, so it's not your fault. It's my fault.
But we don't only talk when you have a book. Well, maybe we kind of
No, it's true. It's true. But yeah, it's been, you and I first connected right in the beginning of Changing the Game Project, and when my first book came out, and as it evolved from a book to a blog and a community around transforming the youth sport experience to a big coaching community as well. And now about 3 years ago, we started our own podcast, definitely partially inspired by you, because I love this format of talking about ideas. And so now the Way of Champions podcast is, 3 years into it and doing great. And finally I was like, this past year, I was like, I got to get this coaching book done. And so, put pen to paper last summer, and December 2019, my new book for coaches called Every Moment Matters came out. And so, it's been quite the wild ride of speaking all over the world and teaching, and now doing a lot of virtual teaching because of the world we live in. And it's great how it constantly evolves, but I think people are hungry for this type of trusted information.
Absolutely. And, I think you sell yourself a little bit short because changing the game project has really become a movement. I mean, it's not just about a book or a website or a podcast or presentation. Or this is a worldwide, a global movement to give youth sports back to the kids, right? I mean, that's what your impetus was in the beginning. It seems to me
Yeah.
that you have really stayed.
Yeah.
You're so modest. Yeah.
I would say that it's been, people ask me, like, I'll get calls all the time, people wanting to build some sort of business like this, and they say, well, what was your 1-year plan, or what was your 5-year plan? I was like, I never had one, because if I had one, it would have always been wrong. It wouldn't have been right. And so I've been okay. I have sort of a vision, directed, by sort of some principles and some ideas of where we want to go. But I've definitely never said, oh, this is the plan, because things would have changed. And so, I like that it's a movement. And I think we've been bolstered along the way by fantastic organizations like the Aspen Institute and their Project Play initiative, and other people, even just in their communities, saying, hey, we can do better than this. We can change this up. And so I think, it's great. And now the problem is not a lack of information for people. It's understanding that we can't just give more information to change behavior. We need to, as the Heath brothers say, direct the elephant as well, right?
Yeah.
The emotional, like, we got to make it emotional to, you can't just be more facts and figures. The data is very clear. How do we emotionally get people to do something a little different in sports? And I definitely did not think that there was going to be a global pandemic, but who knows if this is the paradigm shifting moment where everyone has to stop and reassess and say, what is the value that sport brings to my family? What do we miss? What do we like about it? What do we like about not having sport, dinner together every night, not driving all over the place, not spending all our money on this? Where can we find a happy median? And I hope maybe that some good comes out of all this disruption, which is a terrible time, but maybe this will help bring sport back to what the kids need in it. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite things happening right now is the videos that families are posting of their kids getting creative with physical activity. And not just the kids, the whole family is getting creative, and depending on the age of the kids in the household, it might be, playing with balloons, or it might be playing with balls and, canned goods. I mean, there are all sorts of things happening in homes around the world right now as a response to being, quote, stuck at home. And maybe this creativity, like you said, is, maybe it's going to stick, and maybe it's going to translate once we do come out of this and find our new normal, whatever that means. Maybe our kids are going to be the big winners in all of this. I sure hope so. I hope somebody's a winner.
Yeah, I mean, my son, who's 12, he just released his first video of trick shots. It's a combination of soccer trick shots, little mini ball trick shots, and ping pong ball trick shots. And he probably spent 16 hours trying to capture all these different things that he then edited and distilled down to a minute and a half video. But it's great, and I sent it out. I'm actually going to write a blog about it here soon, and it was just really cool, because it was like, he spent that time working and conceiving and creating, and part of it too was, he was still practicing soccer and juggling a ball and doing things, or we would go and practice, and then the thing was, okay, let's go practice for 40 minutes, and then afterwards I'll stay after with you and help you come up with this trick shot. right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's sort of this father-son time as well, or my daughter's been part of it as well. But it's been really cool. And he sent it out, and our local soccer club shared it with everyone yesterday. And all of a sudden, like, all these people were like calling in, like, wow, where did TJ come up with those ideas? I'm like, well, because he wasn't playing video games.
Right. 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 And
Yeah.
he wasn't in a structured soccer environment. He was left with some freedom to get creative, which is one of the messages that you hammer home multiple times in this book, which is one of the things this book it's become my new Bible, I have to say. And again, it's called Every Moment Matters for those of you who missed the beginning here. But one of the things I really love, John, that you did is you devoted an entire chapter to parents in this book. And, this is a book for coaches. It is to help coaches be better. But I love that you carved out a place for the parents and to help parents understand why it's important for us to give our sports back to our kids. And you're a soccer coach and you come from the soccer world, but the lessons you impart transcend soccer. They really permeate not just sports, they permeate any activity that a child might be involved in.
Yeah, and I think, the big thing for me was when I wrote this book, sort of it was like, what's everything that a coach should learn in coaching school, coaching certification, that they don't get taught, right? And I don't think coaches are hurting for a lack of X's and O's or practice sessions, regardless of sport, right? If you can spell the Google, like, you can find anything you want from a practice standpoint, all the way from some crazy fangled training device to great information and a development plan by your sport governing body. But I felt like there's a lot of things that go into coaching, mentorship, leadership that get brushed over or don't even get mentioned at all. And so that's what this book was really about. And, after 150 podcast episodes talking to NCAA champion coaches, we had Dick Gould from Stanford on in the tennis world. We had Bob Hansen, Santa Cruz and Middlebury. Between those guys, there's, almost 20 national championships there, I think, or something, to Steve Kerr, to all these different coaches. Anson Dorrance, a World Cup winning soccer coach. It was like, what did these coaches talk about over and over and over? And it was things like, it's about relationships. It's about connecting. It's about engaging the other influential people in their life. And so if you're coaching youth sports, there's no one more influential in your athletes than their parents. And this idea that we're going to say to parents, don't talk to me, don't look at me, don't make eye contact with me. It's not realistic. It doesn't make sense. And so this was just this opportunity to say, hey, here's how you can engage with parents. Here's a little blueprint for it. Here's what's acceptable. Here's what's not.
Yeah. And what I really liked is that you took time to really spell out for coaches how to effectively engage parents and how to set boundaries, because that's an important piece of this too. Especially, well, I won't say especially. The tennis world's really the only one I know. So everything I say is kind of based on that. But, our tennis coaches are in a bind right now. They're not able to be out there earning their living coaching these kids, as are coaches in all the sports right now. But one of the things that I've been trying to do is to encourage the coaches to get creative, use this time, find a way to stay valuable, stay relevant to the families that you work with, and to the families, encouraging them to continue to support their coaches if they feel like they're getting something of value during this time. So it's a two-way street. But if you've alienated the parents, then you're really in trouble right now. Yeah,
I agree. And you cut out there a little bit, but I think what you're really trying to say was like, we as a coach, it has to be more. I'm rereading this great biography by Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. It's called Coach Wooden and Me, right? And he talks about what happened in their couple of years together at UCLA. Is nothing compared to their 50-year-long friendship, right? And that's this transformational coach, this figure, this person who sticks with you, and it has its ups and downs and its difficult moments. But I think you really hit the nail on the head that as a coach of any sport, if I have not contributed anything beyond the development of the athlete, or it's this completely transactional relationship of like, I teach skill, that's the only thing you pay me for, I don't care about the human being, well, you're out of luck when we can get back out there again, because people are going to start to see this, right? And those who invest in the person, those are the ones who their kids are going, man, I miss Coach Tim, I miss Coach Jen, right? And that's what they want. And I think this is so critical, because I've been coaching almost 30 years now, and I'm getting these random emails from players of all different parts of my coaching past of, hey, coach, just checking in, making sure your family's good. I'm doing good. I'm here in New York. I'm here there. That are unsolicited. But it's just like that kind of thing says this wasn't just about teaching someone how to kick a ball. And so, again, I really hope this is the reset button in coaching of like, what am I giving to this athlete beyond the court? Because if the answer is not much, I'm just a trainer. I'm not really a coach, and I'm going to be out of work here soon.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that jumped out at me, John, was the message that kept coming through in this book, and it comes through in all of your work, but that to have a lasting impact on an athlete, a young athlete especially, it's not about being the nice, sweet, always complimentary coach. It's about being the honest coach. It's about being the signpost for the athlete about right and wrong, and holding the athlete accountable when they make the wrong decision or a poor decision. And how we as parents oftentimes view coaches like that as being too harsh and not someone we want our child exposed to, when a lot of the time that's exactly what our kid needs. And those are the coaches that our children remember well after they're done playing. And I'd love for you to kind of talk about the challenge as a coach of finding that balance. And I know you write a lot about athlete-centered coaches and that you have to coach each individual. You can't coach a team per se, but you have to look at each athlete as an individual and coach to that. But how do you balance developing that trust and that warmth and that deep relationship with also, making sure that the athlete's doing what they are supposed to do?
Yeah. And the quote that I love and I talked about in the book was one that Dan Coyle wrote about, the culture code. He was talking about Greg Popovich, the Spurs coach. He said, he'll tell you the truth and he'll love you to death.
Yeah.
And I think that is just a perfect description, right? Kids don't need, or athletes don't need more fans, right? Fans are fickle. They need someone who will tell them the truth, who will hold them accountable. But it also can't be a constant barrage of this is what you're doing wrong, this is what you're doing wrong, right? It also has to be, you got to catch them being good. I saw you do that. Now let's do this next. Look at what you've become. If you played yourself last year, you'd crush yourself right now because you've gotten so much better, right? And so it's realizing what every individual needs, holding them accountable to a standard, constantly pushing the envelope, and really, taking them on this journey to a place they probably wouldn't get to on their own, and a place that they've never been. And that's coaching. And I think the more that we recognize that Kids don't need someone who tells them that they're good all the time. You think back to your teacher who was your easy teacher. Think back to your coach who always said, "Oh, great job today," even though when you knew you didn't do a great job. Those aren't the people you necessarily invite to your wedding.
Right.
Like those aren't the ones that really said, "You've got more in you than you're showing, do more." Those are the ones that change lives. And every kid needs at least one of those in his or her life. And every one of us who's a coach has the opportunity to be that person. And we'll never be that for everybody, right? But we can certainly be better people ourselves and invest in ourselves so that we have the best chance of reaching those kids when they're ready to learn.
Well, but the other piece of that is that we as parents have become so hyper aware of what coaches are saying, how they're saying it, what's happening on the court, in the locker room, before and after, yada, yada. And we all talk amongst ourselves, and these opinions get kind of worked out in the stands among the parents and then get kind of blown up and blown out of proportion. And we end up really hurting our kids by not having a clear line of communication between the coach and the parent. And what I mean by that is, and this is something I've been talking about for a really long time, is I feel like there are coaches out there who are not doing a good enough job communicating their philosophy clearly at the beginning, from day one, communicating their expectations clearly, and checking in on a regular basis so that everybody feels like everybody's being held accountable for what's happening. And one of the things you describe in the parenting chapter is an exercise that you recommend that coaches do with their athletes and with the parents at the beginning of each relationship. Well, in soccer, you do it at the beginning of the season, but tennis doesn't really have that. So I'm just kind of gonna just kind of say you have to do it, when you first start with that relationship. Can you talk about that exercise and what you have personally found as a result of doing it with your athletes and your parents, and how it can be adapted to a sport like tennis where you don't have specific seasons?
Yeah. So, this is the idea. I think you're talking about like goal setting exercise and things like that, correct?
And what's important and what you want to get out of the season. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so, there's a couple things that we can do as coaches. Number one, as you were saying all that, I think I always like the phrase, and I don't know who said it, right? Our job is not to prepare the path for the child, but prepare the child for the path, right? And so there's supposed to be ups and downs and difficult things. And so our greatest role as a parent is how do we prepare our kids for the ups and downs that sport and all its good and all its struggle will bring. And I think one of the things that's really important is that coaches and parents should be working together on this. And so there's two things there. Number one, I always like my kids to set their goals, right? What are your individual goals for this season? What are your team goals? And then I like the parents to do the same thing, right? So what are your individual goals for this next year? And what are your, maybe not team goals so much in the tennis world, but then see if they're aligned. Because if your child's reasons for being there are different than yours, you're going to be butting heads all the time. And you really have to understand why your kids are there. And you can push other ideas, but right, your kids are not going to get out of bed at 6 a.m. to work out if, their goal for playing tennis is to have fun and see my friends at practice, And so that is a difficult thing. But then number two, what I recommend is that coaches and parents get on the same page. So from a team perspective, what I might do is say, from a parent perspective, what are your goals for your child this season? Number two, like, what do you want their experience to be like if they don't achieve those things? So that they're not a starter, or they're not all league, or they're not an all-American, or whatever that is. Number three, what would you like your parent experience to be like? Number four, how can you contribute to that experience, right? So, and these things are in writing, which is important, right? So I don't necessarily publish, this is what Sally's mom said, but it's like, I have it down of like, hey, this is what all of you said you would like the parent experience to be like, and how you're going to contribute to that, so that when you're doing the opposite, I will hold you accountable for it. And then how can the coaches help you have that experience? And I think at first, most parents are shocked that the coach actually cares about their experience, that they're like, wow, this is great. And then they don't trust you. Like, why do you want this information? But eventually they realize that, well, you're in it because I'm still the coach and you're still the parent, but your experience matters here. And your contribution to that experience matters. And what most parents want, that answer to that last question, is just communicate better. Communicate better, especially right now, to get back to your previous point. When you're not seeing them once or twice a week, when you're not at practice. I mean, I'm doing a virtual practice every week with the boys that I coach now. And it's really 15 minutes of me and 45 minutes of 12-year-old boys being 12-year-old boys. But they get to see their friends, their teammates, to laugh at each other, to have fun. And I did the first one, and the next day I got like 8 parents were like, wow, my son had so much fun there. When's the next one? Right? And because everyone's locked in their house. And so this is this opportunity of like, wow, this coach is still delivering, even though he's not on the field, even though they're not working on their team tactics. He's still giving them this experience and this connection to their sport and their team. So you know that the moment we're done, it's like, boom, when can we get back together again?
Talk a little bit about that virtual coaching experience, because I think, maybe the tennis coach is tuning in and the parents maybe can learn too. This might be something that translates over. What are you doing specifically? What platform are you using, and what does the session look like?
Sure. I mean, I use Zoom, and I open the room early so they can get on early before I start, which is, half the fun. And then, I'll turn on my camera or turn off my video and mute my microphone. And then sometimes I'll just watch 12-year-olds being 12-year-olds, which is pretty funny. Right. And then I'll jump in and have them all there. And it's usually just like a little word of how's everyone doing? Anyone have any cool stories? We have little, team trick shot competition, and we're setting up like a team. We broke our group into 3 groups, and we're doing sort of a fitness standards competition and trick shot competition and amount of time on the ball competition, the amount of time spent watching soccer competition. And we're going to come up with a winning group, and that group is going to get, dinner served to them by the other group or something, whatever we come up with as a prize. But the idea is they're investing, but they're also investing each other, right? And they're holding each other accountable. So if you're not watching soccer, it's hurting our whole group. Please get out there and watch some games. And so it's fun and it's nice, and we tell stories and we see each other, and kids send in a video of a cool trick shot, and I get to compliment them for it and do that. But I'm also encouraging them, like, how are you working on your game in this moment? Because we had talked about as a group, like, technically we are behind some of the teams that we're playing. And I'm like, well, this is the perfect time to catch up, because you've got nothing but time right now, and you've got no one to play with, or maybe a sibling or a mom or dad. And so, just like I think a tennis player can be hitting balls against the wall, so can a soccer player, right? And you can be catching up and improving this part of your game, and also having fun with it as well. So it shouldn't just be work. And I think if we, it can just be a weekly reminder, and it doesn't have to be a lot, but I think this virtual practice is one of the most important things. And my friend James Leith sort of recommended it, and I tried it, and I loved it, and I've recommended it since. And then my whole soccer club here is, said, oh, we're going to have a coaches meeting, and we're going to mandate that every coach is doing virtual practices every week because it's so much fun and the kids love it. And so I think this is just one of those other things that sets our club up to, this is a transformational experience. This is something that goes beyond showing up a couple of days a week for practice and games on the weekends.
And I suspect this is one of those things that is going to stick with these kids the rest of their lives, right? There was that time back in 2020 where we all had to stay home for weeks on end. And guess what we got to do,
I saw the great thing, Lisa, this elementary school principal, and it was just going around social media, how he said, every kid, they should keep a journal right now, because this is going to be a moment in our lives that we all look back on. Like you just said, remember the time when school was canceled for the year. There was no sports. We had to stay at home, right? What's going through your head? And he said, write your thoughts. What are you doing with your time? What are you learning? What are you interested in? Interview your parents. Talk about how they're dealing with their work or lack of work, their stresses, and then keep this thing, because someday you'll want to read that journal again. And that's one of the things I'm going to tell my boys tomorrow night is I think you all should keep a journal, because I think this is a pretty cool idea.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And, tennis players are encouraged to journal after matches, to make notes about their competitor and, what happened at specific points in the match, so that they can learn from that and go over that with their coaches, or if they're working with a sports psychologist or a mental training specialist, they can review that stuff. But this time that we're experiencing right now, John, it's like nothing else, right? And hopefully we're never going to experience it again in our lifetimes. Hopefully this is our one and done for something this crazy and out of the ordinary. There's so many lessons to be learned right now while we're at home with our families. And it's funny because at the beginning of the shelter at home order, and I'm in California, and so our order came pretty early, not as early as yours, I understand, but it came pretty early. And at first my husband and I were saying, oh my gosh, we're so lucky that we don't have little kids right now. Can you imagine, being stuck at home with a house full of young children and trying to make sure they're doing their schoolwork and make sure they're not killing each other and they're, doing healthy behaviors and not engaging in things you wouldn't want them to engage in. But as this has gone on, my children are all adults living on their own. What I'm experiencing now is I wish to God my kids were young enough to still be at home. I hate that I'm not able to be with them and hug them and, be part of their lives on an intimate level right now. It's really difficult. And I suspect that's what you're talking about, documenting these feelings and trying to remember what it's like so that we can tell these stories later on. And the role of our athletic coaches can be really significant right now, as you're demonstrating clearly with these practices with your team.
Yeah. And again, I think it's so important, and I'm blessed, right? My kids are 12 and 14. So they're at this age where they can manage themselves most of the day in terms of their schoolwork and exercise. And we can go on a bike ride together. We can go on a hike together. We can do some things when we do get outside in our neighborhood, versus having, kids just locked in. You can't go to the playground like that. That would have been really tough. So, and I'm very blessed that I have flexibility in my work schedule, and so does my wife, that we can be around them as well and do things with them. But I think, again, yes, this is an amazing time for reflection and for where coaches can be that voice. Because let's face it, right now we're a couple weeks into this here in Oregon and in California, and it's a long way to go. Kids are starting to get sick of their parents' voice. Right?
Yeah.
And so hearing from a coach, I need you to do this. I want you to do this. Is everything okay? These are just moments of, just FaceTime with somebody else that invests in them and cares about them. I think as I do this in a team environment. So there's 25 kids on there at once. I think, let's just talk safe sport for a moment. I don't think if I was a tennis coach of 12-year-olds, I'd be having one-on-one Zoom calls with my kids, right? Like I'd want an adult there, or at
Yeah.
least I'd record them just to be safe, right? We have to think about safe sport in these moments as well, especially with regards to electronic communication. But man, you can invest in them. And again, if I'm a tennis coach and I have a bunch of athletes that I work with, I mean, why not build some camaraderie amongst them of getting them all together at the same time as well?
Right.
Like, hey, I'll do something individual, but once a week, let's, get all of you on there, because maybe one of you is going to inspire someone else to work hard. Maybe a senior 16-year-old kid is going to inspire that 11-year-old who hasn't been practicing much and looks up to him and goes, wow, he's working way harder than I am, and he's already better than me. I better work. So I don't think it even has to be one-on-one calls. It's just like, hey, I just want to connect with you all, make sure it's all good. And, we have the tools to do this. 15 years ago, we couldn't, but
Right.
now we do. And so practice should not end, but more importantly, our connection, our relationship should not be put on pause right now.
Well, and all of those things that you were talking about in terms of the challenges that you're doing with your teams, that can absolutely be done in tennis, right? I mean, kids can record themselves doing trick shots, doing, how many volleys can you hit up against your garage wall? There are all sorts of things that coaches can devise for the kids they work with to bring the kids together and encourage them to stay in that competitive mindset in a healthy way. So this doesn't have to be a time of just isolation and putting sport aside. It should be a time to figure out a better way or a different way to engage. And, kind of following up on that, John, I want to talk a little bit about the whole coaching the individual athlete-centered coaching, as you call it, where you are focused on the development of the whole athlete as opposed to just being outcome based, right? And
Well, the whole person, and not just
right?
the athlete. Yeah.
Correct. Right. Yeah, I misspoke there. And how coaches can communicate that that's their philosophy to the parents, and then help the parents become more long-term oriented rather than just focusing on results all the time.
Well, I think number one, let's look what goes into results, right? And especially, with young kids, it's early maturity. It's, what's your age group? You grow first. Are you a 13-year-old boy with a mustache, or a 13-year-old boy who looks like he's 10, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like these things all play seriously into results. And so recognizing that this is a journey, and one of the most important things we can do as a parent is be patient, right? Be patient that there's going to be ups and downs, and you're going to have growing pains, and you're going to have difficult times. Like, that's okay, right? But number two, no matter how good you are at tennis, even if you become a pro, you're still going to have 2/3 of your life that are off the court, right? So what did you want to gain from tennis that will help you with most of your life? And it's such an amazing sport. Number one, because you can play it your whole life, but number two, because you can learn these things, and because you're out there by yourself, you can't blame your teammates, you can't blame your coach. It's on you in this moment. Man, that can prepare you so well. So if the lessons that you're getting are, at 4-4, cheat, right? Or at, or how to cut a corner here to get a result. It might play well in this match this weekend and you might win the tournament, but that eventually catches up with you. And it's not going to play well in the rest of your life when, right now, someone calling you for cheating, you argue against it. You cheat in the business world, you end up in jail, right? And so I think
theoretically,
supposedly, right? Yeah, theoretically, You're right. So I think this is really critical that, like, if we can, as coaches, I mean, I've never met a collegiate coach say, who said this about an athlete, like, what a great player, but boy, that is a high character individual. We don't want him around. We don't want her around. Right. So it's like, so this idea that you can't teach character, along with this is silly. Now, I think that high level performance has, the evidence, the research would say that there is a level of ruthlessness and selfishness that goes along with that. To train that well and that long and that hard, you have to give up other things and be about yourself. But overall, it doesn't mean that you have to forsake any human development to create this tennis robot, right? And I think the coach, there's plenty of examples of supremely talented athletes who make it to the highest level, who don't have the mental skills and the character skills to stay there or to continue their development. And when you crash and burn at that level, it's usually very public and very humiliating.
True. But how do you as a coach help the parents of your players understand when you're in a slump during a season? How do you keep the parents from going nuts and saying, well, it's just because you're not a good coach, I'm putting my kid on a different team?
Well, again, if you're constantly investing, if you're making it enjoyable, if the child is progressing and you're communicating with those parents, one bad match is usually not going to make them leave. But if none of that kind of transformational connection exists, then, and if you build your whole coaching relationship with the parent on, look how much we win, well, then of course, when you don't win, well, what else is there? But, when you're, I think there's, like we were saying before, there's so many reasons that you may win or lose. And so a great coach-parent relationship in an individual sport like tennis is this back and forth communication of, well, here's what I see. Here's what is working well right now. Here's what needs work. And, here's the statistics on that last match where, first serve percentage was this. So that's something that we really need to work on, because we're not going to win many matches with 10% first serve percentage, right? And so that's part of the process. But I think a coach who keeps coming back to the process is really, one of the most important things that you can do. And if you get the parents to buy into that process, then you're going to be in a good position. Now, guess what? People are always going to leave. Right? You're never going to be everything for everybody. And I think as a coach, you also have to be okay with that these are my principles. This is what I stand for. And we're not going to cut these corners so we can win today. Right? In the soccer world, I don't know what the tennis equivalent is of it, but in the soccer world, right, I could take my 9-year-old soccer players and say, put one kid in the back who can kick it pretty far and put another really fast kid up front and say, just kick it over the top as often as possible, because eventually they'll screw up and we'll score some goals. But 4 years from now, when everyone's fast and people can read that, well, guess what? That doesn't work anymore. And now I haven't developed any players either. Mm-hmm. So I, as a soccer coach, am always saying, yes, we might lose today. And I know we could kick it over the top to Johnny and win all our games. But what I promise you is that when you're 16, we cannot kick it over the top to Johnny to win all our games. Right. So if we want to be successful when we're 16, we might have to do some different things that don't always necessarily make us win all our matches when we're 10.
Right. In tennis, that would be the drop shot lob combo in the 10 and unders.
Right. So if you were really good at that, you could win all your matches.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how is social media playing into the coach-parent relationship and this whole obsession with winning and trophies and being the champion? And what do we do about it?
Well, I think it's hard. And you know this is because no one posts their 8th place ribbon, right? Like, oh, here's little Johnny. He came in 8th again. Like no one posts that, right? So when you are looking at your feed, you're looking at examples of everyone else's best self or the self they want to portray publicly, but no one's like that inside, right? And so we end up comparing how everyone else looks on the outside to how we feel on the inside, and it can make us as parents feel very inadequate, or it can make us feel like we're letting our kids down because they're not doing as well. But I think and I'm also constantly shocked by the stories of parents posting absolutely horrible things on social media about their coach or even about their kids' teammates or club mates, and then getting totally offended when that gets back to the coach. Like I tell my own kids, like anytime you snap a picture or anytime you post something, it better be something that you're not embarrassed that your mom or dad are going to read, because chances are we're going to read it.
Right.
Or someone's going to share it. Right. And so, just use it wisely. And I mean, there's huge research now on the amount of time spent on social media directly correlates with higher levels of depression and anxiety and all these other things. So there's really not a lot of good stuff that comes out of spending hours surfing the internet to see how your kid's competition is doing out there, because it's not really a real world, and stuff. Now, right, is something like YouTube amazing?
How can we turn that around? What can coaches do? What can parents do to make it stop being about the trophy?
I mean, I don't know. It's hard. It's really, really hard. And
as a coach, what are you posting? I mean, I follow your Changing the Game. You don't post anything about the kids.
Have you ever seen me post anything about how my teams do or how my kids are doing? No, nothing. Right. The only thing I post sometimes is if I catch a big fish. Right. Like that's it. Or like, hey, here's me and my family on top of a mountain skiing. Love it here. This is what I love best. Right. Or this is us camping. But you've never seen me post anything about how my own kids are doing in sports, or that they got good grades or something like that, because I don't think that's really appropriate, nor is it anyone's business. Like, whatever. And I just don't think, I post like my son's display of creativity with his video. Sure. I think that's a little different. That's not like, hey, look what we won, because we didn't win anything. Just like, look how we are spending our time. And so if I didn't have a business that relies so heavily on social media, I would delete every account and never be on there personally. My wife is lucky. She's done that. That.
Yeah. My husband has done that as well. Well, he never was on in the first place, but I'm with you. I mean, I have to be out there, and it is a challenge. And there are coaches, especially in the tennis world. And I don't know enough about the soccer world to speak to that, but the tennis coaches, there are some out there who will say to you, I get business based on the fact that I'm promoting how many of my kids I've gotten, D1 scholarships for, and how many of my kids won national tournaments, and yada, yada. That's how I get business. That's how I market. So
yeah, and I think I don't think there's anything. I mean, again, it's how you do it, right? And so if that's the only thing, right? And because again, I'm sure some of those coaches who do that, and you're like, man, that coach, she's amazing. right? She's
Yeah.
incredible with the kids. I would pay lots of money to have my kid coached by her. And then there's some of those coaches who are the exact opposite. And you're like, they couldn't pay me money to get anywhere near my kids. And so I think having posting that because this is good for business, or saying, hey, our lacrosse club has won 3 national championships. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that, because that motivates people. But once they get in the door, it's your actions that are going to keep them there or not. And I think, I'm on the board of advisors for a small startup called Great Coach. And what we're trying to do is create a sort of a LinkedIn for a coaching world, right? Where basically every club, every coach could have a great coach profile. It's got all their certifications on it. It's got, direct reporting to Safe Sport and things like that. They can share articles. But, you as a tennis club could put up all your coaches and here's their great coach profile. And you can really say, hey, this is a differentiator. Look at our coaches. Look at their certification. Look what people say about them. Because I think right now there's not this, how do you know if your kid's coach is a good coach?
Right, it's word of mouth.
You
mostly.
Really don't. The only thing, and the only thing you can look at is
results.
They did have 3 national champions last year, so they must be doing something right. But do you go and sit in the stands and watch them coach and berate kids and make them cry, or do you just look at that? So I think parents need to be responsible for making better choices of who we're allowing to mentor and coach and teach our kids. And eventually there's going to be platforms, the Angie's list of coaching, if you will, right? Where it's like, okay, this person truly is a vetted and a good coach. And I don't know, hopefully Great Coach is part of it because there's good people behind it and they're really trying to make a difference. And we need a place where sort of a one-stop shopping for how do I learn about this person that I'm entrusting with my child? Because right now that's really, really hard information to find.
Absolutely. So when is Great Coach going to be available?
It's out there right now, but like any online community, right now it's not quite big enough to have this effect. But if every tennis club in Southern California had their coaches on Great Coach and really invested in it, then all of a sudden it's like, So, part of our, strategy has been reaching out to some, like soccer is a behemoth, right? Tennis, right. I don't know the tennis numbers, but it's really big. But we've started to, try to do some work in the skiing world or the fencing world or some sports where there's a small finite group of coaches. Can we get every USA fencing coach on here? And then this becomes the place where we go to differentiate and grow from there. And, obviously there's been a lot of things going on, with U.S. Olympic Committee through gymnastics and stuff. And so we've had a few stop-starts because of changes of leadership and direction that have made it a little bit tough. But what I love about our platform is it's nice and it's easy to use. But I think what I also love is that the people behind it, they did this to make a difference. They know it's necessary. And if we can, if someone else came along and did this well, we'd be sad, but we'd be happy that someone did it better than us.
And at least it's getting done. Yeah. So,
at least it's getting done.
Right. So we'll definitely have a link to that in the show notes for this on ParentingAces.com. Yeah. So for the coaches out there or the club owners or the parents that have an in with the coaches and club owners, take a look and see if this is something that you can share and get the word out about. I think that's great. This is the first I'm hearing of it, John. So thank you for bringing that up. And
yeah, sure.
I'll be excited
to Bill Carrig. He's wonderful. And, his previous one was it was a platform called Rally Me. There's a good tennis analogy, but it was basically used by a lot of Olympic athletes of these non-revenue sports who needed to raise $20, $30, $50,000 a year just to be able to train. And so they created this fundraising platform that athletes could use, and it was bought by Sports Engine or something like that. But it was a really cool thing, and so Bill has been for many years in like, how can we help athletes have a better experience? And then he said, like, what's the biggest thing? Because he's a hockey coach too, right? Okay. So he's like, how do I know that my kid has a good coach? Right. Like, that's crazy that I can't find that out.
Right. Right. Well, I mean, we have the same challenge in tennis for sure. And, I've done a million podcasts about how to find the right coach for your kid. I've written articles about it, but you're right. There's not been a place to go. And it sounds like you and he are kindred spirits. So I'll be excited for you to connect us.
I will, for sure. You'll love them. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we're coming to the end of our hour, and I would be remiss if I didn't give you the opportunity to talk a little bit about Every Moment Matters, where people can buy it, and how they can get a hold of you.
Yeah, sure. So definitely changingthegameproject.com is the mothership of all things that we do. So if you go there, you'll find our blog. You'll probably get a pop-up that lets you just subscribe to what we call our Wednesday Wisdom. So every Wednesday we share interesting articles that we're reading, or our latest podcast, which comes out every Monday, or different things that we're offering. And you can subscribe to the podcast there. You can find out all the other stuff that we're doing, and of course buy a book there. But you can also buy both books on Amazon, or Amazon shipping a little slow on April 2nd here when we're talking. So I've been sending some people to Barnes & Noble or some other platforms, international people. Book Depository is really cool because they don't charge for shipping. And it's, so yeah, all the places you normally get books, that's where you can find it. Every Moment Matters doesn't have the audio version yet. I was going to be in the studio right now, and that got canceled. So I'm trying to figure out how to get some studio time so I can create the audio version of the book. But right now you can get a print copy, and you can get a Kindle, a electric book copy as well. So, I hope anyone your coaches listening, I think they'll find it interesting and helpful because it covers all sports. It's certainly not a soccer book.
No, it is not. And in fact, I've even given it to my husband, who has his own law firm, and said, you need to read this as the managing partner of a business, and you are going to learn some stuff about how to communicate with your staff. And I was reading the book, and I'd yell to him, oh my God, you have to hear this. And I'd read him a passage. So
well, that's good.
It's really, really well written, John, and very digestible, and just so chock full of just gems of wisdom. I thank you so much for taking the time to write it. And thank you for coming back on the podcast. And I know, time we all seem to have a lot of it, but it's also really precious right now. I think we're all realizing how important it is to spend this time with the people we love. So thank you for taking time away from your household and talking with all of us.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Thanks for your great work. And it's been fun to follow your journey through your podcast and your physical moves as well, back to California and all that. For a lot of years now, it's pretty crazy, because you were definitely one of the first people I connected with early on in the process, and you helped me get my foot into the tennis world, which I greatly appreciate.
Well, I love that. I hope that you and your family stay well through all this, and that we all emerge a better youth sports community once this is all over with. And certainly the work you're doing with Changing the Game Project will contribute heavily to that. So I encourage our listeners to check that out if they haven't already. John, thank you so much. And I look forward to talking again soon.
Yes, me too. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And to my listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll catch you next time on Parenting Aces. I'm Lisa Stone, and you've been listening to the Parenting Aces Podcast. For tennis parents, by a tennis parent. If you like what you've heard, please subscribe to us and write a review on iTunes. For more information on navigating the junior and college tennis journey, please visit us online at ParentingAces.com. Thanks for tuning in and sharing us with your tennis community.